Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up live right here on YouTube as well as on Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. I believe we're on Facebook as well tonight, by the way. Hopefully that is the case. I was under the assumption that March Madness began about a week or so from now with the men's and women's tournament. We've already had the conference tournaments in college basketball. Apparently, March Madness has gotten started right now because the NBA, you got a big injury with LeBron James that we'll get to in just a moment, as well as his confrontation with Stephen A. Smith. But I'm recording this, by the way. This is not a live show. It's airing at 6. But as I always say, whenever the show is not live, if there's anything that's happened in the world of sports since I've recorded this, I'm aware of it just at the time that you are watching. And that may apply to the Steelers because they just traded for DK Metcalf. They may sign Aaron Rodgers, which I'm not crazy about. But get to that. Davante Adams to the Rams. Josh Allen signs a big extension. So does Myles Garrett. Get to both of those deals. What else we got? My man Anthony Salas is going to be joining the show in about 25 minutes or so. He was great. He's a current associate at ESPN Films, 30 for 30. He worked as an archival producer for a latest SEC Storied documentary, which premieres tonight on the SEC Network, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We can show you right now. It's called Volunteer for Life. Again, it's the latest in the SEC Storied series from 30 for 30 Productions. And Anthony Salas joins me in about 25 minutes to discuss that. Very excited to have him on the show. He's done a fantastic job with previous docs with ESPN. Get to him and a number of other topics in the world of sports as we go throughout today's show. But first, so LeBron James is out. He strained his groin against the Boston Celtics in a game with the Lakers. A loss in Boston Saturday night. It was a big-time potential finals preview, hyped up, and the Celtics went on a big third-quarter run. Lakers cut it to, I think, 4 late in the midway through the fourth quarter. Braun pulls his groin, gone for the game. And he's going to be out for about 1 to 2 weeks. Dave McMenamin was the first one on that. So here's where I'm at. So the good news is for the Lakers is that, this is obviously not a significant injury, or at least significant enough to potentially put LeBron's playoff put the playoffs in line for LeBron James. More importantly than that, this is because I'm hearing people like, oh my gosh, this could be disastrous for the Lakers. Keep in mind, and I don't mean to take shots here, this is not Anthony Davis, who's now in the driver's seat, carrying Austin Reeves and Dalton Knecht, and once he gets back, Rui Hachimura, among others. Oh no, my friend, this is Luka Doncic. This is, when healthy, one of the 5 best basketball players in the world, who, by the way, is used to carrying, I don't want to say mediocre, let's call it average talent around him to great heights. Before Jalen Brunson was Jalen Brunson, Luka took the Mavs to conference finals. Luka, even before he won a playoff series, cooked the Los Angeles Clippers in back-to-back first rounds in 2020 and in 2021. So he's used to this. And we're starting to see the old Luka. Now he's getting more healthy from the calf injury. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's something I think the Lakers will be able to hang their hat on. Will they retain the 2 seed? Honestly, maybe. The way Denver's playing, at least given that Denver just lost Aaron Gordon again, I doubt Memphis runs them down for the 2 seed. Maybe they do. They're still fool's gold. But this is a team that has 2 number 1 options. And so when one goes out, okay, give it to Luka. Now Luka gets to run the show, and he's like, man, I've been doing this my whole career. I've been doing this since I was a kid in Slovenia, dominating the international circuit. So this is not foreign to Luka. Whereas for Anthony Davis, he could give you great performances here and there as the number 1 option, but could you trust him to sustain it? And could you trust that his performances would directly lead to winning? Because guess what? It did not in New Orleans. That was always the knock on AD. He's the best number 2 option in the league, and as number 1 option, he's great. He's going to put up numbers. It's not necessarily going to translate to winning. So I think right now, as we sit here today with the Los Angeles Lakers, I think they're going to be fine. I really, really do. I think they've got a guy who's capable of taking. Listen, Luka has played with guys. He's obviously Dorian Finney-Smith's a teammate going back to Dallas. He's got shooters around him and Connect and Gabe Vincent and Austin Reeves. He's got plenty of those guys around him to dish it out to. Now, again, scoring may be a little bit more difficult because now defenses don't have to worry about LeBron James, but I think right now for the Lakers, it is, because obviously Oklahoma City just boat raced Denver yesterday. Shea had 40, probably locked up the MVP yesterday afternoon. I still think the Lakers are a good enough team to beat the Thunder in a 7-game series. I think those are saying, oh my gosh, they can't fall to the 4 seed or they're cooked in round 2. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I trust LeBron's playoff experience. I trust the fact that Luka did eliminate this very Oklahoma City team a year ago, which, respect to Kyrie Irving, God bless him, knock on wood, hopefully gets better sooner rather than later. I'll take LeBron James in a matchup, in any playoff matchup over Kyrie Irving, over most players in the history of the NBA. So I think right now for the Lakers, I think they're fine. So that's the LeBron injury front, because, again, I don't think there's much to discuss. They're going to play it safe. They're the 2 seed. It's not like they're fighting just to get in the playoffs or they're fighting to avoid a certain matchup. Denver I still don't think is a great matchup for them, because Jokic versus Jackson Hayes. Going to say I think they'll be fine. They're going to play it safe. LeBron will come back. He'll be ready to go. And the Lakers will be a real team in the playoffs in the West, as we kind of figured that they would be. The bigger story for the Lakers, and this has been percolating since the wee hours of Friday morning, going back to the Lakers win over the Knicks at home at the I still want to say Staples Center, at the Crypto.com Arena on Thursday night. So when we can show you the video footage of what happened, Stephen A. Smith is sitting courtside. Stephen A. Smith, obviously the face of ESPN, well-known Knicks fan, but we could show you obviously the confrontation. But before we do, I figured early edition of Carving Up the Context on this Monday night. So, as the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, primetime Deion Sanders says, "Give me my theme music." On this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, wanted to discuss Stephen A. Smith and LeBron James' little tiff, if you will, on the sidelines, or sitting courtside at the Lakers-Knicks game Thursday night. So we can show you, first of all, let's go and show you what happened, because someone sitting behind took the video. We'll play it 3 times on repeat. But you see LeBron James, he is not happy with Stephen A. Clearly, Stephen A., we can't see his face, but he looks a little stunned. His body language at least say that. LeBron, you can kind of read his lips saying, like, keep my kid's name out your mouth, whatever he's saying there. LeBron's irritated. There's no question about that. So what I think is fascinating about this entire situation, and I want to say this on the front end, because people know how I feel about LeBron. I think he's the greatest basketball player ever. I think he's been an amazing ambassador to the game. We can debate the GOAT stuff another day. Stephen A. Smith, though, it's not like I exactly commentate about commentators every show. Have in the past, but it's not exactly a regular occurrence. So everybody and their mama knows who Stephen A. Smith is. He's the face of the worldwide leader in sports. His resume speaks for itself. He's one of the greatest sports broadcasters that ever lived. And by the way, just got the bag, too, from ESPN. Love Stephen A. I love the path that he has paid for future broadcasters, particularly future broadcasters of color. I think he's done an amazing job on that front. I think he's been a vocal spokesman on that front. And I have to be honest with you guys, he obviously has controversial sports takes, and people call him Screaming A and whatever. I think he's obviously an excellent sports broadcaster. I think as a political commentator, I think he's an A+. I think he is a natural at it. I think when you look at, Fox News will never criticize Trump. MSNBC, if Trump did something good, will never give him credit. Stephen A. Smith calls balls and strikes. Don't necessarily agree with him all the time, although more times than not, because we're both independents who lean left. Nonetheless, Stephen A., I think, is excellent as a political commentator, and you can see the way he has carved out for himself on that front. So I love Stephen A. Smith. I want to make that abundantly clear. LeBron was in the right for the way he handled this. Because the fact of the matter is this, that the whole Bronny discussion I found really disingenuous on some fronts. Because people like to, I shouldn't say people, the critics of LeBron, or at least the critics of the Bronny pick, are of the mindset that, hey, LeBron's great, LeBron's an all-timer, Bronny seems like a good kid. That's like the consensus. Everybody likes Bronny. He's a really good young man, but he does not belong in the NBA. He's not good enough to be in the NBA. He's not good enough. The only reason he's in the NBA is because of his dad. As a matter of fact, the reason that LeBron James confronted Stephen A. Smith, the backstory of this comes from January 29th, 2025. 2025, or in the year 2025. January 29th. This is the night after Bronny James got about 15 minutes of action against the Philadelphia 76ers and was bad for 15 minutes. It was not good. I think the Lakers, they were on a road back-to-back East Coast, Philadelphia. JJ had to use had to extend his rotation, and Bronny was not good in the 15 minutes he played. Stephen A. Smith came out the next day. If we have the quote, we can show it to you right now. And I quote, Stephen A. Smith, "I am pleading with LeBron James as a father. Stop this. Stop this. We all know that Bronny James is in the NBA because of his dad." And end quote. So this is an objectively false statement. You know what? Two things can be true. This is why Carving Up the Context exists, folks. This is why we do the segment. Two things can be true. Bronny James is not drafted by the Los Angeles Lakers if LeBron James is not a Los Angeles Laker. I think even LeBron's, biggest stands, if you will, would agree with that statement. It's not debatable. Clutch Sports, Rich Paul, they pull all the strings to ensure no one else is going to draft him. He's going to be a Laker by the end of round 2. They made that happen. There's no question about that. And simultaneously, the second thing that can be true is that Bronny James is a worthy, his draft status would show you, worthy NBA player. We can show you the numbers. So again, these aren't exactly eye-popping. Bronny James is the 55th overall pick in the draft. Can we show you where he ranks among rookies? Oh, whoops, wrong one. Here it is. 1.4 points per game, not great, but again, none of these stats are great. 56 in points per game, 55th overall pick. 53rd in assists per game, 55th pick. 48th in steals per game, 55th pick. Minutes per game, 56th, 55th pick. And he's played 18 games, which is 51st. And Bronny James, for the final time, was the 55th pick. You're like, Bryson, I don't know. Those are still, regardless of where he ranks among rookies, those still aren't good numbers at all, of course. So let's show you what he's done in the G League, which the G League, the whole premise of it is to develop young players, and Bronny has been actually very good. 21 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.8 steals. He's a good defensive player. Shoots about 44% from the field. That's expected for a guy his size. 39% from 3. That's good. And shoots 81%. He's actually, depending on the day, might be better than his dad at the free throw line. So the kid can play. Keep in mind, and this to me is really the crux of what LeBron, at least part of it, why he was angry. Like, visibly angry with Stephen A. Smith. 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, summer of 2023, and this sounds, morbid or whatever. The kid could have been dead 2 years ago. Bronny James had a heart attack while working out at, I believe it was at USC at that point. Had he not gotten the medical attention, God knows what would have happened. I don't have kids, obviously. I obviously have family that I'm incredibly tight with. Can't even imagine the trauma that would come with that. And that's the kind of thing that sticks with you the rest of your life. Not only that, so, and by the way, for the record, wasn't like Bronny James was riding the bench in high school and got in simply because of his dad. Kid was a McDonald's All-American. Kid could play. Like, there's a reason he got into USC. Kid could play. More so than that. LeBron James, famously, as we all know, grew up without a father, did not know his father. Still doesn't know who his father is. That we know of. And became a father himself at 19 years old. Him and Savannah had Bronny in October of 2004, a year after LeBron James was drafted in the NBA. And by the way, by all accounts, Bron is an excellent father, excellent husband. Obviously, he's been with Savannah since they were both teenagers at St. Vincent St. Mary's High School. Actually, I don't know if Savannah went there, but since they've been together since they were teenagers, has 3 kids. Bronny is people who know him love the kid, says high character, works hard, all of it. It's clearly something LeBron James takes very, very seriously as his role as a father, because he did not have that. And now I'm going to have a man sit there and tell me how to parent my kid? Really? Because you, and again, respect Stephen A., but Stephen A., you know what's best for Bronny James, not me, after the job that I've done raising this young man for the last 20 years. Yeah, it's not gonna fly. And I think what is most telling, LeBron is, I don't think it's even debatable, the most scrutinized athlete, certainly of this generation, maybe of all time. There's those who absolutely adore him and those who hate his guts. There's few in between. I tend to lean more toward the love LeBron a ton because I think he's the greatest player ever. I think the world of LeBron James. most polarizing athlete and the most scrutinized athlete of our lifetimes. He's never come in a media member like this, ever. Has he been testy with media? Has he been, if someone, we all remember when the J.R. Smith had the moment in the finals years ago and Braun lit the press conference early. That's about as far as he goes in terms of negative media reactions. He may fire off a tweet or something. He has never publicly, by the way, in the middle of a game, gone face to face with the guy who attacked him. Stephen A. did not attack LeBron James's play. Stephen A. went further than attacking Bronny's play. And that's what set LeBron James off. You think if Stephen A. in January, if LeBron had 10 points and shot, 3 for 15 from the field, and he said, man, Bron was bad last night. You think Bron's confronting him? Heck, I would go so far as to say this. Do you think if Bronny James had the game that he had, which was objectively terrible against the Sixers, and Stephen A. comes out and said, not sure he's quite ready yet. Like, you see the numbers, they're not good. I don't think he's ready yet. You think LeBron James is going to confront him like that? We saw footage. We don't have it right now on the show. LeBron James goes to Richard Jefferson, who was calling who along with Mike Breen, I think Doris Burke was there, calling the Celtics-Lakers game Saturday night. LeBron's talking to Richard Jefferson, who he won a championship with the Cavs, and you can read LeBron's lips, and he's like, man, it's like when he said, as a father, I'm pleading you. That obviously irritated LeBron. Didn't grow up with a dad, and so he takes great, great pride in being the best that he can possibly be. And so when you criticize my parenting, when you question my parenting methods, then that's going to be a problem, without question. And so on this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, listen, I love Stephen A. Smith and I love LeBron James. I hate to see two guys that I admire come into blows. It sucks. I should say come into blows. That they didn't fight. But it's Stephen A's in the wrong here. He is. And I love him. But the criticism of Bronny went further than this play. And last point I'll make, because I've heard some people say, like, LeBron had to, did Daddy have to step in for Bronny? Folks, if Bronny James confronted Stephen A. Smith, it's one thing for LeBron to do it because his resume speaks for itself and he's the dad. And if Bronny James confronted Stephen A. Smith, it would have been, not only would people have attacked Bronny, it would have been a referendum on Gen Z athletes. Man, they're so sensitive. They can't handle criticism. This is soft in NIL, and this is the problem with society. And LeBron's gotten criticism now, but he's also at his defenders. People would have destroyed Bronny if he was the one who went after Stephen A. Smith. So in this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, love Stephen A. And for the record, if anyone wants to criticize Bronny's play, feel free. He's playing to his draft position, and he's playing really well in the G League, but feel free. But to say he does not belong in the NBA is objectively false. And for Stephen A. to question LeBron's parenting, to instruct LeBron James on how to go about, handling his child, which, by the way, he's done an A++ job at, he went too far, and there's no question about it. So again, today's show is not live. I'm recording this right now. It's 12:30 Eastern Standard Time, so the show's going to air at 6. It's about 6:19, 6:20 now. At the time we are recording this, Anthony Salas joining in about 7 minutes, 7-8 minutes to discuss Volunteer for Life, which I cannot wait to see tonight on the SEC Network. Anthony works for ESPN Films and 30 for 30, so you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for that. I wanted to transition now to my Steelers, who have been in the news for the last 24 hours or so. So last night, I got the news. I was actually in the bathroom, and then my phone goes off. And I look down, and it says that the Steelers have traded for DK Metcalf. I'm like, this is great. This is and we could show you with DK Metcalf. Well, obviously, we understand the physical traits, and he's just a freak of nature from an athletic and physical standpoint. But we could show you in terms of production. I knew he was consistent. I knew he was an excellent player. I didn't know he was, from a consistency basis, off to a historically great start. Show DK Metcalf's numbers. Averages about 1,100 yards per year, 77 catches, 8 touchdowns. That's all great. DK Metcalf's the second player in NFL history to have 900 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns in his first 6 seasons. The other is a man I believe to be the second greatest receiver of all time, Randy Moss. Now, I'm in no way saying DK Metcalf's Randy Moss are going to finish with the career Randy Moss has had, but that's the only guy who's in the same ballpark as DK as it pertains to those 2 individual statistical categories. So this is obviously a great deal for Pittsburgh for a number of reasons. Number one, you establish a clear, and I'm not sure if the other guy's going to like it, a clear and obvious number 1 target. When the Steelers offense on the field, defense knows, okay, Metcalf's the biggest threat. Because this is a guy who's done it. This is a guy who's been consistent. This is a guy who's been healthy. This is a guy we got to worry about. This is a dude who is, I think a couple of years ago, he had a touchdown against the Cowboys where he hit like 22 miles an hour. He's a burner. He's a physical threat in terms of throwing up the ball and him going up and getting it. That's who DK Metcalf is. He is the number 1 receiver. George Pickens is the number 2. And what it does, too, is, listen, I'm sure DK might take it potentially upon himself to try and mentor Pickens. Will Pickens listen? I have my doubts. And people talk about, the crash outs on the sideline with Metcalf and Pickett. Metcalf gets ticked off on the sidelines. Pickens, I talked about this in January, is a freaking psychopath on the sidelines. He's threatening fans. He's not talking to his quarterback. He gives weird answers in the locker room after games. DK Metcalf, by and large, consummate professional. There's really no difference in DK and most number 1 receivers. They're really this side of Terry McLaurin, who doesn't seem to cause any drama in Washington, is that he's going to make it clear, I want the ball in my hands. And so this establishes a hierarchy. This establishes the fact the Steelers have a true number 1. And by the way, they gave him a 5-year, $150 million contract. That part is because we know DK wanted a contract. Seahawks didn't want to pay him, so they traded into the Steelers. That part is significant for this reason. Haven't we lamented the fact, I being one of these people, over the last however many years that the Steelers have been number 1 in terms of spending on defense? And by the way, like not spending really any money at all relative to their spending on defense. On offense, the fact that most of their star players have been draft picks who they usually just let walk. Najee Harris they're going to let walk. Obviously you moved on from, what's my man's name? Deontay Johnson. You moved on from Chase Claypool, moved on from Antonio Brown, you moved on from Antonio Holmes. Like, that's kind of, the Steelers are a defense hit you in the mouth, and that's fine. But it's an offensive league. It's a quarterback's league. And boy, does that transition me now into what I'm going to say next. Reports, most notably by that of Adam Schefter, obviously the lead guy at ESPN in that regard, have stated that now Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers have been trying to keep Justin Fields. The Jets are interested in Justin Fields. Right now, Justin's in Dubai. I guess he's on vacation. He's making a decision on where he wants to play. I'm fine with bringing Justin Fields back. Just go through bridge year, draft a quarterback in 2026. Or unless you like a Riley Leonard or something like that. If Riley Leonard falls in the 3rd round, I'm okay with taking a guy like that there. There's been plenty of franchise quarterbacks. Not that you should necessarily bank on it, but plenty of franchise quarterbacks have gone 3rd round or later. The Steelers, reportedly, according to Adam Schefter, are looking at Aaron Rodgers, which makes no logical sense in any way, shape, or form. So you mean to tell me that the Steelers have, or at least had, he's a free agent himself, Russell Wilson, had a veteran, previous Super Bowl champion. Now, Russell certainly did not hit the highs Aaron hit in terms of individual accomplishments, MVPs. Russell's none. Aaron has 4. So we understand that. But Russell was an elite player at his peak. Russell, for all my critiques of him in the past, seems to have matured as a leader. He, by the way, now with the trade of DK Metcalf, let's see. Did they play together? I could have sworn they did play together in Seattle. So you already have that institutional connection there. Russell knows the playbook. And by the way, Aaron's older. Aaron is going to be more expensive than Russell was last year. Probably more expensive than Russell Wilson is going to be this year. Why not just stick with the vet you got now, who, by the way, again, for Russell's faults, Denver humbled him, I think. He's not really going to be a distraction outside of the locker. That's just not Meanwhile, you have a guy who we know is obviously football is not number one on his priority list in terms of his focus, which you kind of have to be as an athlete, or at least if you want to continue to play at this level. And is going to go on McAfee every Tuesday, spout off who knows what about God knows what, and is going to continue to be a poor leader. He's going to demand excellence from everybody else, but not put those same practices into measure himself. Why do the Steelers want to do this? He's old, going to be more expensive than Russell Wilson would be, doesn't know the playbook like Russ, doesn't have the connection with DK Metcalf like Russ, and doesn't move as well as Russ. Russell doesn't move as well as he used to, but Aaron's a dang statue in the pocket at this stage of his career. By the way, we saw Aaron Rodgers last year with a below-average offensive line. Wasn't very good. Have you seen the Steelers O-line? It's probably the weakness of their entire football team. D-line's great. Linebackers are good. Secondary's really good. Kicker's awesome. Receivers now, really strong. You've got talent in the run game, but it can't necessarily produce because of the guys up front. And now Aaron's going to deal with that, by the way, against the likes of a guy who just re-signed, we'll talk about later, Myles Garrett, against the Ravens defense, against, Cincinnati. Anyone can carve that defense. But the AFC North defensive division, Aaron is now, should he sign in Pittsburgh, again, maybe he has signed in Pittsburgh for the record. This show's not live. This is recorded at like 12:30 in the afternoon right now. He is a distant third on the best quarterbacks in that division. Folks, if Kirk Cousins were to sign in Cleveland, I'd probably give Aaron the edge because of how awful Kirk was at the end in Atlanta. It's not by a landslide because we know it's Lamar and Burrow back and forth. People have strong opinions on that. And then it's a distant third. At this point, I'm iffy on the Steelers going after Sam Darnold because I think Sam Darnold has Sam Darnold has as ideal of a spot last year in Minnesota as you could possibly have. And he melted at the end of the year in the two most important games for Minnesota, get the 1-seed game against the Lions and the playoff game against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, you can bang on the O-line, which, by the way, the Steelers' O-line isn't very good. But Sam's young. Sam has corrected some of the errors that he had with the Jets as it pertains to reckless football. Sam has now played some big games, so maybe there's experience there. Do I think Sam would necessarily be the franchise quarterback long-term Pittsburgh? Don't really think so. But if the Steelers want to say, you know what, we don't necessarily think Sam's the guy. We don't even necessarily think Justin Fields is going to be the guy long-term. We're going to maybe draft somebody mid-round this year. We're going to have a veteran quarterback, another bridge year. It's going to be average. It's going to be classic Mike Tomlin. No losing season, and they get steamrolled in the playoffs from the first quarter on, and then we draft a guy next year. Then why wouldn't you just keep Russell Wilson? The guys in the locker room like Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson knows the playbook. Russell Wilson has a connection with DK Metcalf. Russell Wilson's less expensive than Aaron, moves better than Aaron, is certainly less of a distraction than Aaron. It's younger than Aaron. And the Steelers want to try out a guy who has not been elite that's now been 4 years, who has not won a playoff game in 5 seasons. And that's going to be their potential option. It makes no logical sense in any way, shape, or form. And it would be an abomination if the Steelers make this move. There's no other way around it. If your whole entire plan is to keep a bridge quarterback, just keep Russ. Aaron's not the guy. Aaron's not going to make you contend. Aaron is, dare I say, Aaron at this stage, you may not even be a playoff team with Aaron. It's not a very good idea. And if the Steelers do it, can't say I'll necessarily be shocked. Because if one thing the Steelers are seemingly content with at that position in the last 5 years, it is mediocrity in its highest form. So we'll see. Be back in a minute after the break, but after the break, my man Anthony Salas of ESPN Films will be joining us. He was the archival producer for the newest SEC Storied documentary on the SEC Network, which premieres tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, called Volunteer for Life, about Chris Lofton, his career in Tennessee basketball. Anthony Salas of ESPN Films joining us 1 minute from now. Definitely stay tuned. You're going to want to see it. Welcome back to Carving It Up. So my guest today is an associate with ESPN Films, 30 for 30 for 30 podcasts, ESPN original content, and SEC Storied. More on that in just a second. He has worked in a number of roles, including associate producer, archival coordinator, editor, production assistant, and archival producer. In that most recent role, he helped create the latest for the Sports Emmy-nominated series, SEC Storied. This latest documentary tells the story of Tennessee Volunteers men's basketball legend Chris Lofton. The documentary, we can go and pull it up here, is called Volunteer for Life, directed by Sean Silva. It premieres Monday night, March 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time, and tells the story of Chris Lofton, his career, and his late career battle with cancer. So without further ado, let's go and bring on the man who was an integral part in creating this documentary. Would you please welcome Anthony Salas, who is joining the show. Anthony, I appreciate you coming on, my man. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I appreciate it. We're near the weekend, so I'm doing pretty good.
Oh, 100%. No, we're recording this on Thursday, so this show will probably be airing Sunday or Monday, so the audience obviously will be able to go straight from this and maybe hopefully watch this documentary on the SEC Network. So you've worked in a number of 30 for 30 documentaries in the past. I've got the list here. Dream On, which talks about, the women's basketball team, Team USA back in the 90s. You talk about the great Heisman race of 1997. One of my personal favorites, even as a Steelers fan, is Bullies of Baltimore. I thought that was as fun a documentary start to finish as I've seen. But as I mentioned before, you're an archival producer on this new SEC Storied, Volunteer for Life, tells the story of Chris Lofton. What goes into how does the discussion start? Like, hey, this is a player, this is an athlete. We want to tell his story. It's obviously unique, but a guy who was and we'll talk about more, but a college basketball superstar, a legitimate superstar, who obviously had these health concerns later in his career. Talk about what went into sort of the inspiration for that.
Yeah, well, we have a great deal with the SEC, thanks to our network, SEC Network. And one of the things that we've been doing for the past I don't know how many years, essentially trying to find those great SEC stories. And the thing is I believe this, as well as some other stuff that's, came out and been around the pike, has floated around these ideas for a while. So a lot of things that go into the timing of, okay, let's tell this story, can come down to things like budget, when is the money available, and that sort of thing, trying to figure out where stuff can go around a release slate. So for Chris Lofton, we're looking at, one of the pinnacle times, if not the pinnacle time for, Tennessee men's basketball. They were going on perennial growth for the tournament, right? And leading that charge was Chris Lofton. And you have this guy who was sort of under-recruited, he came out, grew up in Kentucky, wanted to go to Kentucky. They didn't even look at him. He had dreams of wanting to play for the Wildcats. And, Bruce Pearl just took a chance and ended up with one of the most dedicated and hardworking guys that they had in the program. And his leadership really came about when it came to his secret battle that he had with cancer that most people didn't know about until years later at times. So the idea originally came about from one of our senior ESPN writers, Chris Lowe. He was very tight with the team, very close with the team. And he helped us develop and figure out what the story really is going to be, and plays a central part in it. There's a very high-stakes moment that I will allow everyone else to figure out on next Monday night, or tonight, whenever this airs. And really what we do when it comes to SEC Storied 30 for 30 films in general is like we want to dive past the sports, really. So when we look at Chris Lofton or any of our subjects, Boys of Baltimore or whatever, it's like, what is deeper behind this. With Bullies of Baltimore, it's framed, the opening sort of sequences about Tony Saragusa and his passing, right? So you're trying to connect the audience with these things on a deeper level. Me personally, I've had family members pass, with cancer. Most people have known someone that either has cancer or has passed from it. So not only was this a wonderful story for me in terms of it being a homie story, it's about the Vols. I grew up in Kingsport, an hour and a half away. So, but being able to give hope and tell a story of that sort of perseverance and trial through various adversities, and being able to sort of uplift yourself and succeed in your own ways outside of that.
Well, that's one thing I'll bring up too, is that ESPN over the years has done a remarkable job about raising. I think everybody knows about the V Foundation, the work that they've done over the years. Seeing Dick Vitale most recently come back from his long battle with cancer, back to calling college basketball games, which is just fantastic. But obviously, I actually wore my Vols hoodie today for the occasion. I had to represent, but obviously I'm a Vols fan. You're a Vols fan. So we know who Chris Lofton is. We kind of know the story. But just to give the average viewer context about how good this guy was, we can put up this graphic about what he was. He averaged about 16 a game. Again, keep in mind, this is a guy who was 6'1", 6'1" guard, 45% from the field, shot 42% from three-point range, 84 from the line. But you see the accomplishments. 3-time first-team All-SEC, a 2-time second-team All-American, and most recently, a couple of years ago, he actually got his number retired by Tennessee, rightfully so. And if anyone still doesn't believe us how good this guy was, well, we can show you probably the defining moment of Chris Lofton's career. We'll take you back December 23rd, 2006, in a matchup against Texas, and see if maybe if you're watching, you can recognize this future NBA legend who Chris Lofton hits a go-ahead shot over.
Lofton directing traffic. Durant out to guard him. Look at this long-range shot. Oh, he got it! I can't believe he hit that! Tennessee with the lead!
That's just kind of who he was, right? Big heart, hit clutch shots. Obviously, we showed you the numbers. Elite shooter, and there's no question about that. But we sort of fast forward till the end of that season and sort of that sequence where he does run into the trials and the adversity, as you bring up. No one aside from Bruce Pearl, at the time the head coach of the Vols, now the head coach at Auburn, his parents, a select few number of people, his teammates really, Anthony, did not know about what was going on. How does this all sort of, without giving away too many spoilers, how does this all sort of come to fruition in Chris Lofton's journey?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the big dilemmas, right? Is like there's this whole situation of let me figure out how to sort of frame around this.
Take your time, no worries.
Yeah, there's this whole situation on like Chris's illness, and sort of because it started off, he started to feel fine, and then it's just like test came back, and the next thing you know, they were weighing the options of what it could be. Because if you know Chris Lofton, if you know how highly Bruce Pearl talks about him and what his reputation was at the time, it's like this test can't be true. So they did some investigating, and it came down to a few options and of what the test actually can be, and it ended up being cancer. And Chris made the decision really early on, like with the medical staff and Bruce and his family's like, I don't want this to be a distraction. I don't want this to be some sort of campaign. I don't want this to be, taking away anything from the job that it is that we have to do. And in doing so, I mean, yeah, no one knew outside of a handful of people until an ESPN article after his senior year came out about this, which was written by Chris Lowe. So, I mean, the film dives a little deeper into how that all came about, the decisions that were going into that process, some of the dilemmas that the team had to face, and some journalistic questions that came about. But one of the things that you see is core to who Chris is and was as a Vol is that determination to fight through anything. Like you were saying earlier, I mean, he was 6'1", he's undersized. He's a guy who was overlooked, and now in the face of one of the most dreadful and biggest fights that anyone may have to deal with, he's now taking it upon himself to take the extra load of doing practices, playing games, trying to play at that elite high level when your body is eating itself, out. So it's just really a core testament to who Chris is and sort of what he means as a Vol for everyone that's in the film and what people have to, the positive light that people have to say about him. And thankfully, well-deserved, he had his number retired not too long ago.
No question. 100%. I mean, he's without question one of the greatest players. And I mean, when people think about Tennessee basketball, they tend to gravitate towards the women's side, obviously, and rightfully so. The late, great Pat Summitt, what she did. Candace Parker, who actually, I believe, was interviewed for this documentary. You see her in the trailer. Love Candace Parker. So were you guys able to interview Chris Lofton? Were you able to get him in to ask him questions for this documentary? Was he himself a focal point in terms of answering questions?
Oh, yeah, 100%. For any of our films, especially SEC Storied, when films are very much focused on a particular subject, not necessarily saying per se a biopic, but when you're dealing with something like SEC Storied and you're focused on a conference, you're trying to find these kind of minute stories that you can expand and give a new light into. And a lot of times the focus comes with access. Right. So Chris is a very part of the film. He sat down, we interviewed him in Thompson Bowling Arena. Wow. So it was a wonderful interview, wonderful footage. He was grateful and graceful with his time. But yeah, access and subject participation is key. We're currently going through something with another film where essentially that participation is hinging on what's going to occur with the process of the film. So, and one of the it can vary in this process as well, because like I'm working on our Stuart Scott film. So
oh wow,
it's like awesome. you're dealing with someone who has passed, right? And so how you are able to structure and tell a story from a subject who is still living versus someone who has unfortunately passed on is definitely unique in each way and presents challenges and viewpoints in other ways. So Chris was a big part. We were able to get Candace Parker in as well. Bruce is in the film. There's some local writers that were a part of the film. Chris Lowe's in the film. So yeah, it's very much a Tennessee story, which is something that I'm very, very happy about.
Well, yeah, I imagine that obviously hit close to home, being able to do something that, and talk about a guy who, I mean, I'm sure you grew up watching. And so a couple of questions left. So for the average Tennessee fan, I'll start with that and then go to the average sports consumer, or even people who are just interested in fascinating people and stories. Is there anything that specifically again, this is I'm trying to tightrope, like without getting into the nitty-gritty spoilers of it, but is there anything that you took away, you think Tennessee fans will take away, that not even just information, but so much as it can be as simple as just an appreciation for Chris or something deeper than that? Do you kind of understand what I'm getting at as far as
yes,
what Tennessee Vol fans can take away that maybe they wouldn't have been able to before?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting because Chris played in the mid-2000s, so we have Vol fans and people that are born, that miss that window of time. So this whole story is going to be completely new to them, right? Then you also have people that are going to know Chris's story, that's going to know that era, that loves that era, and can essentially get back into that nostalgia, refeel how they were feeling at the time. But I think on a broader stroke for both Vols fans and people in general is finding that connection where Chris sort of becomes – he's a Vols legend, but you get to know the human behind the uniform and get to understand and sympathize with that and look at it more so as a human being who's going through something, has gone through something that all of us in some way has a wide connection to. We try to make films. I try to make films and be a part of films in a way to steer them to be inspirational. I want, outside of depending on what the story can be, sometimes that can happen, sometimes it can't. But at the end of the day, I want the viewers to watch our films, and this film in particular especially, it hits it right on the head, is to feel uplifted and feel empowered just in their own day-to-day. Because Chris is relatable in so many ways outside of the illness, and one of the things as well as he's not defined by the illness, right, that he has. So,
right.
So yeah, that is probably some of the big takeaways with the film.
And as far as this last question I'll ask, and then I'll get into, I guess something more personal, but for the average sports consumer, do you think that obviously certainly doesn't think of Tennessee basketball or Tennessee sports top of mind necessarily, but are you looking for maybe I imagine a similar sort of emotional feeling, but also something maybe different for somebody who doesn't know Chris's story at all? Is it a similar sort of emotional feeling that you're trying to evoke out of that with the average sports fan as opposed to Tennessee fans, or is it all kind of just meshed into one? If that makes sense.
I mean, the best films, well, sports by nature is emotion, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what sort of sport you love, there's passion, there's pain, there's all sorts of things that we all go through. And trying to connect that emotion, telling stories about the human experience, and sports being one of the most beautiful ways to do that, because naturally you have these challenges that need to be overcame. That's incredibly important to how we look at the films that we make and the films that we try to put out there for the general public. While it is very much a Tennessee story, it's very much a Vols story, in a similar way to how part of Heisman, our 97 Heisman film, was a Vols story and a Tennessee story, taking people back in the time of Peyton Manning coming back for his senior year. It's largely about serving the larger sports fan as well, which is just a company initiative, is to serve sports fans anytime, anywhere. So we try to do that to the best of our ability, and this film, I believe, really does hit that mark broadly on top of anyone that may not be a Tennessee fan. Now, I will say, if you're someone else in the SEC and you don't like Tennessee, I can't do nothing for you.
No question. No, I'll tell you what, as far as the SEC Storied documentaries, I don't think anything for me, I'm excited for this, but at least to this point, has surpassed the Book of Manning that came out about a decade ago about Archie Manning, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning. It's one of my favorite sports docs I've ever seen. ESPN obviously has done an amazing job with those over the years. Lastly, I guess a personal question, and I'll be totally transparent with the audience, that I reached out to you, because this is Chris Lofton is a Tennessee legend, kind of getting a behind the scenes look at that, but also because you are a fellow ETSU Buck. We come from the same school, very proud Buccaneers on the screen right now. But and I told you before we shot this that, it's really, really cool to see a guy come from, who walked the same campus that I'm walking right now, trying to pursue something great in a similar field, except I'm trying to go into sports broadcasting, and seeing a guy like yourself, we have, similar professors, similar, obviously, environment. in this stage of our lives. Seeing you be able to already accomplish this much this early on in your career is really dope to see. So I just want to say that, but also, what has that journey been like for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, not to give a whole life story because no one wants to hear that, and I don't want to hear
Feel
that.
free.
But like, growing up in Kingsport and growing up in the Lingard neighborhood, it's being that kid that grew up in a house that his, grandparents built. You don't normally think of working for a company and a team that's as lovely as the team that I've been able to be a part of, or Disney larger. It's very much dreams coming true, but the important thing is with hard work, with extra time, like you doing this show, you producing the show, having stuff I didn't expect, to be frank, like, oh, he has graphics ready, he's got a clip going, like putting that work in and showing that passion will drive everything forward to where it needs to be. So East Tennessee is very much in my blood. It's who I am. It's core to my being. I always love those mountains. I love ETSU. I love Northeast State. Go Bears. And the big thing that I've said before was I don't want myself or other people from the area that's made it, in quotes, to be outliers, right? Like ETSU has around 15,000 students. A lot of them, many, many, many of them are impeccable and driven at what it is that they want to do. All that people need is just an opportunity. So my one word of advice is do the extra work to be prepared, because luck is preparation, just meeting the opportunity. So.
No question about that. Anthony Salas, appreciate you taking time to do this. We need to do it again for sure. Whenever, be it the Stuart Scott film, which you sort of teased, I cannot wait to see that whenever it comes out, or anything else in the future. You're always welcome on the show, my man, and take care. I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, we'll be back after the break on Carving It Up. Welcome back to Carving It Up. So, yes, that was my interview with Anthony Salas. Did that on Thursday morning. And again, just to show one more time, you can tune in to Volunteer for Life Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time, live on the SEC Network. You definitely want to check that out. Anthony was fantastic. We talked for a long time afterwards, and really, really good dude. Obviously, another ETSU, well, he's an ETSU grad. I haven't graduated yet, but a fellow ETSU Buccaneer, so definitely some ties there. But definitely check out Volunteer for Life about Chris Lopton. That premieres at the time this is airing about 5 minutes from now. So feel free to go on ESPN, SEC Network, and tune into that. So again, I'm recording this part of the show earlier in the day. It's about a little after 1 p.m. Eastern. We've had some deals go down. Chris Godwin is staying in Tampa, 3-year deal. That just broke. Looked like the Saints just signed a corner. Jordan Lewis is going to Jacksonville. I saw Dan Moore. Twitter is down right now at the time that I am recording this. Hopefully it's up by the time the show goes live, so we can go live on Twitter. But it looks like, okay, yeah, Dan Moore, who part of the Steelers tackle, has signed with the Titans. So, and I think is it a 3-year deal? I can't. Let me check right now because I'm checking on my computer right now because, again, Twitter's down. 4-year, $82 million contract, $50 million guaranteed. So he's, I guess, going to be opposite J.C. Latham on the Tennessee Titans offensive line. I think at this point, we're a month and a half out of the draft. It feels like they're going to go Cam Ward with the first pick, although that's no guarantee. So at the time, again, that we are recording this, that's our free agent update. So if any Aaron Rodgers, God forbid, Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers news, drops at the time that the show is going, again, I am aware of it. Unfortunately, just not the time that you're watching this particular show. We had some other news in free agency all yesterday. Again, March Madness NFL, they have really set the tone for, I guess, college basketball in about a week and a half to begin their tournaments. But you've got, what do we got? Carlton Davis to the Patriots just broke. Okay, so there you go. Anyways, but a deal yesterday that I found notable. Davante Adams to the Los Angeles Rams, 2 years, $46 million. So the superstar wide receiver, a guy who has potential Hall of Fame, a Hall of Fame induction in his future, is now a Los Angeles Rams. So we know that the Rams are going to try and move off Cooper Kupp because of, and this is what I found interesting, is that the contracts, Cooper Kupp, Davante Adams, there's not a huge gap in terms of what they make. It appears that the Rams are going to move on from Cooper Kupp, I think in large part because of the injury history. And at this point, Davante is the better player. At least it feels that way. The production would say that. What I find really, I don't want to say impressive. I don't want to give him too much credit for this, but it did feel like wherever Aaron Rodgers goes, Davante will follow. You know, the Raiders, I guess they traded him to Vegas knowing he obviously wanted a deal, but I don't think Aaron Rodgers necessarily knew about that. Davante, but together for the Packers for years, were amazing with the Packers until the playoffs. And with the Jets last year, they were fine. I mean, they won 5 games, but they were fine. Davante, they brought him in to be the savior. That's not who he is. He is a wide receiver, and he is an aging wide receiver. We can show you his numbers over the past 3 seasons with bad quarterback play. Okay, 30 touchdowns. He averages about 1,200 receiving yards per season, 96 catches per season, and about 12.8 yards per catch. Again, this is with Derek Carr and older Aaron Rodgers, whoever the Raiders trotted at quarterback at times, Aiden O'Connell the last couple of seasons, at least, or he was in Vegas for about 2.5 years, and then with the Jets for the last half of last season. Now you put him in LA. And listen, the Rams have gone 2 weeks ago. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Stafford might be out of there. Now they're going to be good in the future because they have an amazing GM and an amazing coach. They're going to rebound. But this year, they're probably out of the mix. It feels like the Niners would be my favorite, certainly with what Seattle has done, tearing that whole thing down, would be the clear and obvious favorite to win the NFC West. I don't trust Arizona. Why should I? But now Stafford's back. So now he's gotten the bag, rightfully so. Now you bring in Davante Adams with Puka Nacua, with Kyron Williams, with Tyler Higbee, with an offensive line that's been good, with, again, a GM in Les Snead. That is the thing that I found most shocking about the Rams last season is not only maybe the greatest Ram of all time, he's certainly in that discussion, Aaron Donald, one of the greatest defensive players in the history of the game of football. Aaron Donald retires, and their defensive line might have actually been a little more productive. I mean, that was remarkable what they were able to do in the draft with Jared Verse, with Byron Young. Linebackers are good. Defensive. So you expect, I don't know what their cap situation is in terms of whether they can restructure some guys' contracts, bring some guys in, but in the draft, it's Les Snead. It's Brett Veach in Kansas City is going to hit on draft picks. Les Snead's going to hit on draft picks. We know Howie Roseman's going to hit on draft picks. So there's certain guys that you have to automatically assume the team's going to be, even if marginally better the season after the previous one because of what they do consistently in the NFL draft. And so I think this is it's a great move for the Rams. It's a great move for Davante Adams. Like, this is, it would have really sucked. And we see this more often than we should in sports where guys will be, I mean, Davante at his peak was the best receiver in the game. The numbers say, you could say he was with prime Aaron Rodgers. Davante was the single best receiver in the National Football League. Then I think he kind of handed the baton to Justin Jefferson around that time. But guy was awesome, was the best route runner of the game, great hands, all of it. And to see, he's playing meaningless football games in Vegas, and he's playing meaningless football games with the Jets, 2 horribly run franchises. Maybe Brady will help get the Raiders turned around. Pete Carroll, I like some of the moves they made. But in the here and now, that's their recent history, and the Jets are the Jets. The Jets will always be the Jets. Now he's with one of the best run franchise in the NFL. And again, the team, I think folks are finally starting to come around on this now that Davante is there. Like, oh, all of a sudden, look at the Rams. Folks, this team, Philly, the Packers were dead in arrival. Philly took care of business against Green Bay. NFC Championship game, boat race Washington. Super Bowl, boat race. The dynasty, Kansas City. And the Rams, a warm weather team on a short week in the snow. Stafford with multiple turnovers. Saquon goes crazy in that game. And if Jalen Carter does not make a play late, folks, I think the Rams win that game. All of those things against them, and they almost won the game. So at this point, Arizona is going to be 7 wins. I mean, that's just kind of what they've been over the last, really my whole lifetime. It's anywhere between you'll have the Carson Palmer year, but by and large, it's like 3 wins to 8 wins. That's really the Cardinals' ceiling and who they've been. The Seahawks are in a rebuild. We know that. The Niners are, I think, still going to be a real factor in that now that everybody's healthy. So it's not an easy division. It's going to be imperative for the Rams. If they can somehow find a way, there'll probably be more Eagles fans there, but if they can somehow find a way to get a proverbial NFC Championship game or playoff game in general against the Eagles at SoFi, where weather's not a factor, where all of these things can be in your favor, they can beat them. We saw it last year. Everything went against them. And they could have easily won that football game if one of the best interior defensive linemen, Jalen Carter, doesn't make an amazing play, a clutch play late, sacking Matthew Stafford. So I think this Rams team, I already thought they were a contender, and they just got better yesterday, by signing Davante Adams. So, man, now, I mean, really for the first time since he was a young player, Davante's now your number 2. Puka's your 1. Now that draws attention away from Davante. Again, I know they had Garrett Wilson last year with the Jets, but it's Jeff Ulbrich, the Jets never know what they're doing. So Vegas is a better example where everybody knew week after week after week, that's the guy we got a game plan for. Quarterback doesn't scare us. They had Josh Jacobs, who's a really good player and had a great year in Green Bay last year, but Josh Jacobs is not keeping you up at night. Davante Adams is. At least at that stage he wasn't. So now he's the number 2 threat. That's pretty scary for the Los Angeles Rams. And again, like people might say, oh, Garrett Wilson was the number. So we're taking Jeff Ulbrich over. You think Jeff Ulbrich's going to do, or Sean McVay's going to do as good of a job as Jeff Ulbrich? Going to go out on a limb and say that's probably unlikely. So a really good move for the Rams, and I think they're not that far behind Philly. I really, really don't. I think it is. Again, a lot of the NFL's matchups. So that's not to say, because they're that close to the Super Bowl champs who rolled through everybody else, they're the second best team. Not necessarily. Football, sports is about matchups. But that's going to be a real team this year. And I'll be fascinated to see what they do in the draft. Maybe if they try and get another defensive back. Watch out for the Rams. They're kind of scary. Just watch out. Matt makes Matthew Stafford's job easier. I wonder if Les Snead and Sean McVay, when there was the discussions with Stafford and there was the rumors he might go to the Giants and whatever, if they told him, hey, we may land Davante, but he may not want to come here unless you're here. I don't know. Malik Neighbors is really talented. The Giants have a good defensive line. Everything else they have is pretty much horrible. Or you could stay here with 2 excellent receivers, a good tight end, an excellent running back, defense. McVay's your coach. Warm weather. We almost beat the eventual champions last year. Seemed like it'd be a little bit more attractive. I don't know. Maybe this came together after the Stafford deal. I don't know, but I have to imagine that they were at least talking to to Davante Adams about making this deal. I think I said trade, by the way. I think I mentioned. Did I say trade Davante Adams? I apologize. Davante was released by the Jets last week. Speaking of 2 big extensions, and this is where we'll end our show, barring any sort of big breaking news that breaks. Again, right now the show, I'm recording this at 1:20 p.m. Eastern. It's airing. It's about 7 p.m. Eastern at the time that this is airing on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. But so let's start with Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, it kind of came out of nowhere because no one had really even discussed any sort of news regarding Josh Allen's contract. But Buffalo's like, hey, let's just get it done now. Let's have our franchise quarterback in for the long haul. So they signed him to a contract, biggest in NFL history, 6 years, $330 million for Josh Allen. It's going to pay him on average about $55 million per year, I believe. $250 million is guaranteed. So Josh got the bag. There's no question about that. And he's in for Buffalo for long term. Not like we thought that the Bills were going to even consider moving off him. That would be asinine. So MVP of the league, there's a lot of controversy around that. I defended it. He would have been my MVP, just like Lamar with lesser stats than Dak would have been my MVP last year. It's not just a statistical award. Otherwise, Joe Burrow would have had a legit argument. Point is, he's obviously one of the 4 best quarterbacks in the NFL. I had him at 4th coming this season. I now I'm at 2nd. Because my big knock on Josh was, man, you're so freaking gifted. Just if you're going to throw picks because you're aggressive, man, that's fine. That's the best quarterback. I used to, kind of get on Aaron Rodgers in the past, like, dude, take some shots down the field. So what if you throw the occasional pick? Like the risk outweighs the reward with how great you are. The same applies to a number of guys. Josh Allen is not scared to take those risks, but sometimes he would take chances where it's like, okay, there's no chance this is going to work, Josh. Like, what are you doing? And he really cut that out of his game last year. Now we'll see if it continues. Maybe, the full year with Joe Brady, with maybe not the pressure to get it to one guy. Stephon Diggs helped him out. The Bills are kind of a well-rounded offense at this point. Really good running game with James Cook. You got Khalil Shakir, who I believe they just signed over the weekend, keeping him there. They've got, obviously, the kid, I'm forgetting his name, the wide receiver, I'm forgetting Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman, 2 good tight ends. Like, the Bills have a really good offense. It's their defense that was just awful over the course of big games last year. You have to imagine they'll go heavy defense in this upcoming NFL draft. By the way, they released Von Miller as well, which freed some money up. So maybe if they add somebody in free agency, we'll see. But this is going to be a defense first offseason for the Buffalo Bills after they got Khalil Shakir done and most notably Josh Allen done. What this does is it just adds to the stack of factors in people who are going to put pressure on Josh Allen, myself being one of those people. I think Philadelphia winning the Super Bowl really, really, really put a lot of pressure on 2 guys, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Now, Lamar's only faced Mahomes once in the playoffs, and he was terrible in that game, but we've only seen it one time. Josh Allen, I would argue there's a little bit more pressure. He's faced him 4 times, lost all 4, and gotten outplayed. Clearly outplayed in 3 of the 4, and in the iconic 13-second game, I called a draw because you should be able to get a stop in 13 seconds, but Mahomes was awesome in that game. Allen was awesome in that game. There's been spots where Allen hasn't been that good or has been really good, and Mahomes has just been better. 0-4, that's no quarterback in NFL history. I repeat that. In NFL history has ever been 0-4 against another quarterback in the postseason. That's never happened before until Josh Allen lost last year in the AFC title game. We can show you his playoff numbers since 2020 because 2020 is the first year. He was drafted in 2018, wasn't very good rookie year, was fine second year, really came onto the scene year 3, was an MVP finalist. Since 2020, we could show you Josh Allen's numbers in the postseason. They're excellent. He's 2nd touchdown passes, tied for 2nd in rush touchdowns as a quarterback, 6th in completion percentage, 3rd in passer rating, 5th in record. So 5th in record is not terrible. 7-5 is not bad for a playoff record, but you see that right down there. 4 of the 5 losses come, to the Kansas City Chiefs, who we know, obviously, they're the dynasty. They've had the most success of anybody in the AFC. They've never not gone to the AFC title game in the Mahomes era. Certainly not to say Josh should have beaten him all 4 times. Last couple of years, though, because the first time they got blown out, Buffalo wasn't ready for the moment. It's fine. Year 2, 13-second game, that's on the defense. Last 2 times they faced, though, Josh Allen had the ball, down 3, final 2 minutes, didn't get the job done. Be it a misread on a 3rd down a couple of playoff games ago, be it, being reckless at times with the football. Last game against Kansas City, not picking up on the blitzes, the Steve Spagnuolo blitzes in the 4th quarter on 4th down. We could blame some of that on coaching. Some of that's on Josh Allen. He just completed year 7. He should be aware of these things at this stage. And so I think this just puts all the more pressure. We talk about, Brady beat Mahomes twice, but yeah, he's the GOAT. He's Tom Brady. Joe Burrow did it. Yeah, but Joe was on a roll that year. It was kind of a weird season for Kansas City. It was kind of the last year the Chiefs didn't have a great defense. It's like, okay, and I don't mean this is a shot. Not only did Jalen Hurts and the Eagles beat them, they throttled them. I mean, start to finish, they throttled them. The Eagles' defense was great, but Jalen Hurts was phenomenal. And with respect to Jalen Champion, nothing but the best to him. He's not better than Josh Allen. There's even running is a toss-up. There's literally nothing he does better than Josh Allen. And Jalen, I think, is excellent. I think Jalen has a legit case to be the 5th best quarterback in the league. I mean, with his playoff performance, he's been excellent. Winning, Josh is objectively the better player. That even the most diehard of Eagles fans would have to acknowledge that. At some point, he's got to get past Patrick. At some point, we've got to see him with that big-time, iconic playoff moment for a guy of his caliber. Because if you think about the previous generation of Hall of Fame quarterbacks, you got Tom Brady. He's the GOAT. That speaks for itself. Peyton Manning. Now, Peyton, the funny thing for him, you could say, he didn't have any all-time great playoff moments. You know, his 4 Super Bowls, he was really good in one. I'm trying to remember, fine in another, bad in the last 2. He actually won the final one. That was about Denver's defense. But keep in mind, Peyton Manning, to win his first Super Bowl, came back from 21-3 down to beat Tom Brady and the Patriots to get Indianapolis to the Super Bowl, where they ended up being Chicago. So Peyton Manning has had that big-time playoff moment. Drew Brees, getting the Saints to a Super Bowl, winning the Super Bowl, the big all-time playoff moment. Even Aaron Rodgers, who has had some awful playoff games. Boy, he was good in that Super Bowl against the Steelers back in the 2010 season, Super Bowl 45 at Jerry World. He's got that moment on his resume. Big Ben's got it. The game-winning drive against the Cardinals. Like, you think, really, Phillip Rivers, you go to freaking Eli Manning has 2 of them. The helmet catch to Tyree, and then the long field pass to Mario Manningham, which I think is the best throw of Eli's career. It's one of the best throws I've ever seen in the Super Bowl. Josh doesn't have that. Burrow's got it by beating Mahomes. Mahomes obviously has plenty. Jalen's got it. Stafford's got it. When's that going to come for Josh? You could say that the 13-second game, and it obviously was not his fault they lost, but they did lose. Like, that did happen. So he's an MVP. I thought deservedly so. I would have voted him MVP last year. But we've got 3 quarterbacks now. And if you want to take out Brady because he's retired and he's the GOAT, fine. We've got 2 quarterbacks active who have beaten Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game. And for the record, outplayed him in both. Burrow outplayed him in the game he beat him, and Jalen vastly outplayed him in the Super Bowl. Like, Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. Mahomes is one of the greatest to ever play the position ever. He's not invincible. The Chiefs, we just saw it in the Super Bowl. Not invincible. Great, situationally brilliant, not invincible. And the opportunities have been there. In Kansas City, in Buffalo, final 2 minutes, with the ball in your hands, up there, down 3. And he hasn't come through. That's not to say he can't, but he hasn't. So I think this contract, $330 million, 6 years, well-deserved, obviously. But we kind of need to see, that big, that's the Josh Allen game. That's the Josh Allen moment where he finally got past Mahomes, where he finally got to Super Bowl. Won a championship. So I think this does put even more pressure on Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills. And again, as far as Buffalo's front office, now you got to go, even if the defense doesn't have to be, Phillies this year. But could it be at least mediocre? Because it was not mediocre last year. It was not good. Against playoff teams, they gave up like 33 points per game. Like, they were not good. So that's going to be something they address. Josh is an amazing player. Got to start seeing it in the postseason in terms of that big, because a guy of his caliber, guy who's a future potential first ballot Hall of Famer and MVP, we expect something different out of those guys than we do the tier below them. And a guy who I believe is in the tier below him, at the top of the tier below him, but below him is Jalen Hurts, and he's had that. Had it twice. He was great in the first Super Bowl against Kansas City and was even better last Super Bowl. So we got to see it from Josh Allen. Okay, speaking of getting his money, and this will be our last topic before we get out of here, again, unless any breaking news comes in at the time we are recording this, which is about, at this time right now, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So Myles Garrett, I think, surprised a lot of people in signing an extension with the Cleveland Browns. If I can pull up the deal here, it is 4 years, $40 million per year, $123.5 million guaranteed. That is the largest contract ever given in NFL history to a non-quarterback. So let's first say that Myles Garrett has earned every penny of this. He is one of the most generationally gifted pass rushers we've seen. I've been in the mindset that the numbers are pretty obvious, that TJ Watt is the better pass rusher. Not like by a large margin, but TJ Watt's the better pass rusher. Myles Garrett, though, is a freaking monster coming around the edge. And I've called him. He's obviously not as good as this player, folks. Don't have your heads blow off. He's the modern-day Reggie White. Reggie White is a Mount Rushmore defensive player. Myles Garrett is not that. I'm saying Reggie used to make all-pro linemen look like high schoolers. Myles Garrett does that from time to time because of his – a guy that big, that strong should not be that fast, and yet he is, and he is literally unstoppable. Stays in Cleveland. We could show you, obviously, because Myles Garrett, it appears that this was – potentially a play just to get the bag, which I don't fault him for. He's a great player. He's worth every penny after he requested a trade about a month ago. But Myles Garrett's agent, who's done a fantastic job, put out a statement, Nicole Lynn of Clutch Sports. She said, Andrew Barry and I spent the last 36 hours getting the deal done. Basically, Myles had a change of heart, and he's excited to go from Cleveland to Canton and chase a championship in Ohio. Hold on just a second. Wait. Sorry, folks. Let me. What's that say? Can we zoom into that middle part? What does that say? Myles. Okay, here it is. Myles had a change of heart, and he's excited to go from Cleveland to Canton and chase a championship. Cleveland championship. Is that Cleveland championship? I know Myles Garrett is not equating championship and Cleveland in the same. I know he's not. And him and his amazing agent, by the way, are not. They're not actually implying that. The winning a championship in Cleveland is a realistic goal now. By the way, Myles Garrett, chase the money. Don't blame him. He's worth every penny. For the record, he would have gotten that pretty much anywhere. I think the Lions would have compensated him. I think Washington would have paid him. Buffalo would have certainly moved, finagled their cap to bring in Myles Garrett. If you want to get the bag, sure. The championship? Canton? Yeah. Oh, you better believe Myles Garrett's well on his way to Canton. Be a short bus drive. Cleveland to Canton. Championship? Cleveland? We are referring to the same franchise that has not been to an AFC title game since 1989. We are referring to the same franchise where the guy at the tailgates wears the Browns home jersey that's got the nameplates of all the quarterbacks who've been in Cleveland over the last however many years, 30 years or so. We are talking about that same franchise. I just want to make sure we're abundantly clear on that. Same team. For the record, same city that has seen one championship in the last, let's do the math, 61 years, and it was won by maybe the greatest basketball player of all time. Other than that, they're kind of known for either choke jobs when it looks like they're just almost there, or just being incompetent, which is what the Browns have made a name for over the course of their long history, which was actually quite impressive prior to the Super Bowl era. But in the Super Bowl era, the Browns are probably the biggest joke in the NFL. Myles Garrett. By the way, love me some Myles Garrett. Good dude, awesome player, worth every penny. Can we put that? Can we put that up one more time? Myles had a change of heart, and he's excited. He's excited to go from Cleveland to Canton. That is absolutely going to happen, and chase a championship in Ohio. I mean, if he went to the Bengals, maybe Joe Burrow and Chase, they could win. They went to the Super Bowl not long ago. Cleveland. I don't know. I've never been on this earth for 21, 22 years this summer. And if there's one thing that I've learned is that you got to pay taxes. You're going to die. And Cleveland sports, in particular the Cleveland Browns, they tend to find a way to mess it up. That's kind of their brand. So Myles Garrett could stay, but championship? Really? Okay. Maybe it's just a press statement just to make Browns fans feel good. Maybe it's that. Because I'll tell you what's not going to make them feel good. Their football team. Myles Garrett will. Their football team, different story. Man, nothing like some good old-fashioned Cleveland Browns delusion to close out the show. And with that, that is all the time we have for today's episode of Carving Up Live. I want to once again thank Anthony Salas for joining the show today to discuss, I think it's on right now on the SEC Network, so definitely check it out. Right now, Volunteer for Life, directed by Sean Silva on the SEC Network. It is premiering right now as we speak on the SEC Network. Definitely check that out. He was an archival producer for that documentary. Definitely check it out. Shout out Anthony Salas. Hopefully we can get him on the show again. And appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, be sure to like, share, comment, and please take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button down there. It helps the channel grow exponentially. And just as importantly, be sure to go subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here on YouTube, as well as any and everywhere that you get your favorite podcasts. You can find us on the Grid Network. I'm going to set this show up to air at 6 because, again, it's pre-taped. If there's anything that's happened, Aaron Rodgers, something else, again, I'm aware of it, just not the time you're watching me. So anyone who's in the comment section, appreciate y'all chiming in. Hopefully we'll be live next week. We're going to try and make that happen. But until then, stay safe out there. Take care of everything you got. Take care of. God bless y'all. Peace out. Cleveland? Championship? That's a good one. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.